Good afternoon to all of you and welcome to our last online event for 2020. Thank you for joining us for today's talk. December has brought some very encouraging news and we are all looking to step into 2021 with a lot more positivity and can't wait to say goodbye to 2020. I have with me my colleague Rachel. She's the one behind the scenes, making sure everything goes smoothly, not just with these events, but all the operational work at office too. Don't miss her lovely earrings, the Christmassy ones. She has been in Malta for over a month and plans to stay there for a few more weeks. Understandable when you have good sunshine, food, and interesting places to spend your time in. She has curated a new Malta tour with great care. And so if you are looking to book a tour of Malta anytime soon, you know your first point of contact. I'm Sunita, one of the travel specialists at Travel the Unknown. The Balkans are former Yugoslavia to most of us. Having been through years of war and turbulent times in the 80s and 90s, the Balkan nations now stand out strong and independent, each with its own cultural, linguistic, and historical identity. These appeal to the most intrepid traveler and would satisfy those who want to peel back the historical layers of each country's modernizing image. There is so much more to these countries than the accursed mountains in Albania, traditional villages in Bosnia and Herzegovina, jazz festival in Kosovo, the world's deepest underwater cave in North Macedonia, national parks in Montenegro, and Devil's Town in Serbia. We are very pleased to have with us today Robert Dee, who has seen and experienced all these countries then and now. Robert has a long association with the Balkan region. He started escorting tours to Yugoslavia back in 1985. Robert was also the youngest member of the British Yugoslav Society, whose chairman was the legendary Sir Fitzroy Maclean. In 2000, he joined Radisson Hotels, which had a major presence throughout the region. As the head of global leisure sales for the group, he organized many familiarization trips for tour operators and even guided a few of them himself. Robert has his own consultancy and has been involved in several projects in the Balkans, focused on sustainable tourism development. He is also a guest lecturer at the University of Surrey School of Tourism. He is the co-founder of New Deal Europe, a business dedicated to growth and development of tourism in the Balkans. Post Robert's presentation, I will give a very quick overview of our tours, and then we will have time for question answers, followed by whatever Robert has planned for us. Let's take this opportunity to do a group photo. Please ensure your mics remain muted and videos remain off at all times. You will have the chance to turn on your videos after the question answer round. You can send us questions in the meantime through the chat box and we will take them up during the question answer round. Now it's time for Robert to take center stage. Over to you, Robert.
Well, thank you, Sunita. Thank you for such a lovely welcome. And thank you for having me here this evening on what I know is your last talk before Christmas. So let's keep it bright and merry and cheerful as much as I can anyway. And what I'm going to do is, it does say Discover the Balkans with Robert Dee. I'm going to take you on my journey through the Balkans, if you like. It's the Balkans that I know and the Balkans that I've experienced. So if you're looking for me to run through the Travel the Unknown programs, sorry, that's not going to happen. That's Sunita's job, and she'll be doing that at the end. I'll be taking you to the places I've been to. I'll be telling you my stories. I'll be telling you about my experiences, and I hope it will inspire you to come and visit all these destinations. And I thought, since Sunita mentioned I've got this long association with the Balkans, just to establish my credibility, I would start with a picture of me as what they call a vodič down there, which is a tour guide. So this is me back in 1985, haven't aged a bit, in my Cosmos days on the coast of Croatia. And here I am with some actual tourists from my groups and a local guide on the mountains surrounding Sarajevo. That's Sarajevo, you can see down in the distance. And finally, here's another one of me. I don't know why I put this one in. But it's me in the Socha Valley, and yes, I really did wear those clothes in the 1980s, And I don't blame that woman or that child for looking at me that way. I think a lot of people must have done, and I don't know how I managed to survive. But anyway, I did, and it was a great experience and allowed me really to get to know what was Yugoslavia back then. And there are so many things I love about it and about the area. You know, the food, the spectacular scenery, the mountains. I mean, it is called the Balkans because it's named after a mountain range, the Balkan mountain range. The languages, the cultures, the ethnicities, and the history, all the things that Sunita mentioned in her introduction. The Balkans is a big area. It will go from Slovenia down to Greece for some people, and from Croatia across to Romania. But for our purposes tonight, we're just going to focus on 6 countries, which I've highlighted for you there. But ordinarily, the Balkans would be this little comedy map I cobbled together for you. You can see that, you know, the range of mountains, lots of things to see, monasteries, castles, and so on. And we're going to go on a journey around most of them in the next 45, 50 minutes or so. So let's zone in on the countries that we're going to look at. So we're looking at 6: Serbia, Kosovo, North Macedonia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Albania. I've put all the facts and figures on there. You can read it for yourself. You can get them off Google. I won't spend any time on this, except to put it in context. Let's just do some comparisons. So Montenegro, the green one there, that's about the same size as Northern Ireland, give or take about 100 square miles. Serbia, the largest country, the orange one, is about the size of Scotland. And then when you cobble together all of the other countries, you come to something that's just shy of the size of England. So effectively, the region that we're looking at, and it's not what was the whole of Yugoslavia, is about the size of the UK. So it's quite a big area that we're going to cover. So we will need some time to go through it. And it didn't always look that way. Yugoslavia, it's had a very complex history. It's the place that is the crossroads of Europe, really. It was between, you know, the Roman Empire in the east and the Roman Empire in the west. It's between the north and the south. It's been on the trade routes. It's been on the Silk Road. It's been fought over many times. And it's been so many wars and treaties in there. Clearly there's something there that people want. And really, I think one of the reasons why I'm attracted to it and why people come visit it in huge numbers. But I've just pulled up a few key dates for you. Sunita wanted me to mention the history to you because it kind of puts things in context and allows you to understand the region a little bit better. And I would say anybody who's going to the region, please have a grasp of some of the history, because it's easier to understand how people think and the makeup of some of the countries. And I'm going to start back in 1389 with the Battle of Kosovo. This was the battle where the Ottomans invaded from Istanbul. The Ottoman Empire had the first battle with the Serbians and the allies, the Bosnians. They were both kingdoms at the time. And it was a bit of a Pyrrhic victory for the Ottomans. It was a very bloody battle, but it allowed them to establish a foothold. And in 1396, the Battle of Nicopolis was fought between the Ottomans who had gone there and embedded themselves in the Balkans, and the Crusaders who wanted to liberate it and make it a Christian region. The Crusaders were routed, and ever since that time, right up until the end of the First World War, in the region that we're looking at, the Ottomans were the dominant power and the occupying power. But there'd been many things that happened in between. The Russo-Turkish War, the Crimean War even happened in the Balkans. Congresses following wars, so the Congress of Berlin, which established Macedonia, it established the rights of Montenegro and Serbia. The First Balkan War, where Albania was established through the Treaty of London, and so on. And then we have the start of the First World War in Sarajevo, which I'll come on to very shortly. After the First World War, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia established. Didn't last long, because after the war, the Communist Party took over, and so on until Yugoslavia broke up in 1991. And it still goes on today, and there are agreements and things. We'll see them even up to the present day. But rather than me going through all of this in kind of detail, the easiest way for you to see it is to visualize it. So what I've done, And be honest with you, I've stolen a video off the internet from YouTube, which runs through in 2 minutes the entire history I've just described to you in graphic form. So just watch and enjoy, and I'll try and talk over it. It's a little bit loud. Let's turn it. So here we are, Ottomans coming in around now. There they come. Now you'll see this yellow-orange coloured strip all along the coast. That's the Venice Republic. And this really explains why Croatia, as well as part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, why this was a Catholic area and why the Ottoman area is Muslim, but also influenced by the Byzantine culture with the Orthodox religion. Now you see, look, centuries of Austro-Hungarian Ottoman conflict, with territories changing in the north and in the centre constantly. This was the time when the Ottomans really embedded themselves in there, and when much of the great architecture that we see, or that you will see in my presentation, was built. Montenegro suddenly appearing as an independent kingdom. Still the Venice Republic having a stronghold there, and Ragusa, you see, down there, that was what we now know as the Dubrovnik. Now that you're starting to see the shape of Austro-Hungarian Empire create Croatia, Serbia gaining some independence as an independent kingdom, Wallachia, we now know as Romania. Then 1878, this Treaty of Berlin, Bulgaria established, Serbia, Montenegro all established as independent kingdoms, Albania after the Balkan Wars. Then Kingdom of Yugoslavia, communism, right the way through until the 1990s. Starts to break up. Serbia, Montenegro holding out as a rump Yugoslavian state, and then finally Kosovo being created in 2008. Whew, that was as quick as I could do it, I'm afraid, Sunita, but it's quite overpowering when you see all the changes that have gone on there. When you think of what's happened in our country in the last 600 years, okay, we had the union between England and Scotland, we had Ireland breaking away in the 1920s and the formation of Northern Ireland, and that's it. Look at what happened in this region, constantly fought over, constant battles, and it really has shaped how this area has developed. Now, I'll be honest with you, that it's a real challenge to get your head around all of this stuff. I know some of you will be struggling with that video. I still struggle with the Balkans and all its complexities. Whenever I take groups up there, I always get asked the same questions over and over again. They keep coming up. You know, what happened to Yugoslavia? Why are there so many small countries here? Why are the Muslims in Bosnia? Why did the First World War start in the Balkans? All of those things. And I hope I'm sure you'll have the same questions, and I'll try and answer them as we go through the talk. But I should warn you, my caveat is this. The last time I took a group out to Yugoslavia, I met with a friend of mine. He used to be a diplomat in the Yugoslav era, and he served mainly in the USA. And he said to me, and he looked at me in the eye like this, as Balkan people do, very sternly and very seriously. And he said, "Robert, you will never understand the Balkans." And it kind of shook me to my core, actually. But he's right. I will never understand the Balkans, and I'll make damn sure that by the end of this presentation, you also won't understand the Balkans. No, I didn't mean to say that, did I? No, you will understand the Balkans, but maybe it will be very complex. Anyway, what he did say really was, you will never understand the Balkans, but we like the fact that you try and you understand it more than most. And maybe that's why Sunita's asked me to present to you today. So let's get on with it. Let's go through the first of our destinations, Serbia. It's the biggest country in the region. As you saw from the map changes, for many years, it's been the dominant power in the region. So let's start with the biggest city. And probably not the most attractive picture, but there's a little story why I've put this one up. When I was first traveling in the area, it was before I was a guide, and it was about 1980, and I was doing interrailing, actually with my sister. And we got off the train in Belgrade, having traveled overnight. And it was the first time I'd been to Yugoslavia. I got off, I walked up the hill, And I came to these buildings and they were grey and grimy, as many buildings were in the 1980s, especially in Eastern Europe. Somebody's got their microphone on. So, thank you. Filthy, horrible buildings, but they were the Communist Party buildings. And although they were really dark and overpowering, and I was looking up at them, and oh gosh. And you know what? I fell in love with them. I loved the griminess. I loved this Unitarian monolith that was in front of me. And I started to embrace all of Eastern Europe and all the Iron Curtain countries as they were then. But of course, I didn't have to live under it. I'm aware of that. But anyway, I thought I'd start with some communist architecture and my first link to the Balkans. But there are great buildings in Belgrade, classical buildings from the 19th century. On the left, you've got the City Hall, and on the right, two pictures of the Serbian Parliament, which was, of course, for many years, the Yugoslav Parliament, hence why it's so massive and dominant in the city centre. There are always things happening, like all parliaments, like our parliament. If you go past ours, there's always things happening. On the day that I was there, there were demonstrations. I think it was about Kosovo, going through the first stages of EU membership. Can't be sure because everything in Serbia and that part of the Balkans is written in Cyrillic, and my Cyrillic isn't 100%. But anyway, that's what I thought was happening. And there's always activity in the city centre, but really the jewel, if you like, the glory of Belgrade is the Kalemegdan fortress, which is on the highest point of the city. And it overlooks the two great rivers of the Balkans, the Danube and the Sava. This is the confluence of the two great rivers. And it really explains why Belgrade exists and why it became the big superpower in the region. Because this was the crossroads. People traveled by river. This was the place where all the roads met, all the Roman roads came together at this point. And Kalemegdan is the place where you experience this and you can really see this. Now, I should explain at this point that 99.9% of the photographs in this presentation are my photographs, mostly taken with a very poor camera, most of them taken with an iPhone that's hopelessly out of date. So they're not brochure photographs. They're not things off the internet that have been touched up and highlighted. Sometimes they've been done on a miserable day, as some of these were. These were done, I think, in January 20. They're not the best, but they're genuine experiences, and I hope it gives you a flavour of what the destinations are really like. But the fortress is everything, as is the park around it. It's a great place where the young gather, where there are concerts and activities and sports events throughout the summer. It's great by day and by night. And because it's the highest point in Belgrade, like many of these countries, you have, in this case, it's the Victory Monument. It's a monument to the Serbs' victory during the First Balkan War. But all of these countries, they have the mother figure, the monument to the motherland, the Victory Monument. This one is particularly impressive because it was built, designed by Ivan Mestrovic, who's the most famous sculptor from what was Yugoslavia. If you've been to Dubrovnik, you may well have been to his grave in Savtat. Now, I'm going to get the political stuff out of the way really early, and let's start with Gavrilo Princip here on the left. So Gavrilo Princip was the guy who on the 28th of June 1914 assassinated the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife in Sarajevo. At the time, Bosnia was occupied by Austro-Hungarian Empire. It had been given to the Austro-Hungarians as part of the treaty in 1878. And when it was carved, when the whole Balkan region was carved up by the great superpowers. Princip lived there. He was part of an organization called Mladena Bosna, meaning young Bosnia, and he was Serbian. So he's lauded as a great patriot in Serbia, because he was trying to get an occupying power out of the region. So difficult for us to understand, I know, but I thought I'd put it up there so you understand something of the way people think, because it's often quite shocking when people see this statue. But it's there, as are some of the other things I'm going to say in the next couple of minutes. The middle picture is the grave of Tito in what's known as the House of Flowers. And when my guide back in the day told me we're going off to the House of Flowers, I actually thought it was a garden. And in a way it is, because this was the winter garden of Tito's own house. And it was called the House of Flowers because back in the day, after he died, this area was always full of flowers that were left there by the Yugoslav people, but they've all been replaced by what you see now, the white stones.
Could you try again?
So anyway, this is where Tito was buried alongside his wife. And the building is behind what you see on the top right-hand corner there. This is the Museum of Yugoslav History, which is a fabulous 1962 modernist building. But the museum in there, obviously I put my heart on my sleeve regarding this communist past with that first slide. It's fabulous. It's got so many artifacts. It's got all the gifts that Tito was given when he was president, but so many artifacts about life under the communists in Yugoslavia. And if you're a 20th century history buff like I am, you will find it fascinating and you will be in there for hours. And finally on this slide, I'm putting it right out there. This is the former Ministry of Defense building in Belgrade, and the damage was caused by the bombs from NATO during the attacks in April 1999 during the Kosovo War. And I want to put it up there just to let people know that you will, if you come to this region, you will see occasionally some damage. You will see some elements where cult ethnic groupings have moved from one region or from one country to another. You'll see damaged buildings, you'll see bullet holes, not everywhere. You know, you'll see it in Bosnia, you'll see it in Kosovo in small amounts, and you'll see it in the center of Belgrade. And when I first saw this, I was quite horrified that they left it like this. And then I thought, actually, do you know where I come from? And you probably worked out already that, you know, I'm from Merseyside. Where I come from, for years in the city centre, it's still there, it was St. Luke's Church, which is a bombed out church from the Second World War. In the city centre of London, right next to St. Paul's Cathedral, we've got Christ Church Greyfriars, which is a bombed out church. And of course, in Coventry, we've got Coventry Cathedral. And these are all to remind us of what we went through in the Second World War. And I fully understand why people in Belgrade have kept this as a memorial for what they went through in 1999. And I think it's important to understand that we understand those things. But moving on from the politics, let's go to the fun. So all these cities have great old centres and fun bits. And this is the fun part of Belgrade. Belgrade is seen by young people as a party city, a party capital. People will go there just to party for the weekend. And this is Skadalia, the old part of Belgrade with cobbled streets and hills, ethnic restaurants, fantastic Serbian food, Serbian wine in these restaurants, music by musicians coming up to your tables. It's, as it says on the signpost there, it's like the Montmartre of Serbia, full of small entrepreneurs and craft beer breweries and so on. And here's one of them right in the center, this lovely guy that we met who was making his own brandy. And of course, in the interests of research and purely for your benefit, I had to try some, of course, and it's absolutely fabulous. And I recommend it to anyone who goes there. Now, done the politics, let's do the religion. So the religion in Serbia is principally Serbian Orthodox. There are different Orthodox traditions throughout Eastern Europe. In Serbia, it's the Serbian Orthodox tradition. And the church that most people would see when they come to Belgrade is St. Mark's Church, the one you can see on the left with the trams. The center of it, you see in the middle picture, the inside of it, sorry, is in the middle picture. Serbian Orthodox Church, like all the Orthodox churches, they don't have seats. You go in there, you stand, you watch the service. If you're lucky and you time it well, you can go in there when there's a service on, and I tell you, the choral singing is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it really lifts the soul when you go into these places. The iconography is marvelous. The main church of the Serbian Orthodox community is St. Sava's Cathedral, which you see here on the right. It's huge. It started in 1935 and it's still not finished. It's the biggest church, it's the cathedral, it's the seat of the patriarch. And as I said, it's still not finished, but Vladimir Putin has promised plenty of ruble. So I think it will be finished pretty soon. And the plan is, now that Hagia Sophia has been converted into a mosque in Istanbul, that this will be the greatest Orthodox church in Europe. So, okay, then outside of Belgrade, there's a lot to see. There's a lot to Serbia. It is the biggest country after all. The second city is Novi Sad. It's in the region known as Vojvodina, which was the Hungarian, originally the Hungarian-speaking part, and like Kosovo was a kind of separate autonomous entity within Serbia. But it's a fascinating city because of this Hungarian heritage. Having gone through all of that politics stuff, I thought it's only right that I should put up my picture of the Dove of Peace from when I was there for the Orthodox New Year. And the interesting thing about the Orthodox religion is that they follow a different calendar. So their New Year is usually around the second week of January. And that's when I was there to celebrate the Orthodox New Year. But Serbia has got 5 national parks. My picture there shows Fruška Gora, which is lakes, rivers, you see the guy fishing, rolling hills, and in my humble opinion, the best vineyards in Serbia. Probably the most famous and one of the most famous sites in Serbia is the Đerdap National Park, which is the gorge in the Danube. It sweeps around, really deep gorge that you can drive along it too. It's also one of the earliest places where we see civilization in Europe. And there's the Đerdap Castle. And finally on this page, the top right-hand picture there, that's a spomenik. And I'm a bit of a sucker for spomeniks, I have to be honest. What are they? They're memorials, essentially, and they were built by the communists, typically to celebrate a great battle, victories in battle, principally by the communists. In some cases, atrocities, in some cases to commemorate concentration camps, but they all have this amazing post-war communist design about them. Many of them now are in ruins because they're associated with this communist past, and there's a group dedicated to restoring them. There's a database of them on the internet if you wish to go and visit them. This one I pulled up because it's particularly poignant and meaningful for me. This is in Kragujevac, which is the kind of Lidica, like they have in the Czech Republic, or the Orodor Sorglan of Serbia. So this was a place where just under 3,000 men and boys aged 16 to 60 were massacred by the Nazis, 1 for every 100 German soldiers that were killed in Gornji Milanovac. So it's one because of its past that is still totally intact. So moving on, Montenegro. Now here, apologies for my pictures here that are coming up here, because I had an issue looking for my Montenegro pictures. They're on a and they're all the pictures of my family as well. They make occasional guest appearances in these pictures, but they were on a disc that I found ended up being corrupt. So I go back with these pictures to the times of me being a Vodic. And let's start with the coastline. There's 293 kilometers of coast, and much of it now is taken up with luxury hotel development, and it's really changing the way people view Montenegro as a destination. And by all means go there, and if you do go along the coast, then don't miss this 15th century islet of Sveti Stefan. It's now the 5-star Aman resort. It developed over time, and it includes royal palaces that were built for the Queen of Yugoslavia in the early part of the 20th century. But just the view here that I've got is spectacular. I think you can still have that view because most of the resort and the buildings are still hidden underneath the scrub there that you can see. One thing I do miss about the coastline here, because of the development, is this picture that you see on the right, and of this lady. Now, this is on the beach at Ulcin, which is the last beach before you go into Albania. And when I first went there, all you could see all along the beach was row upon row of heads, just heads sticking out of the sand, because the sand was believed to have therapeutic healing qualities. So people would lie in the sand for hours to cure them, I think, of rheumatism and all kinds of things. You might occasionally see this still going on. You're more likely to see it across the border in Albania. But if you go, please go and do it, and don't just stay in the 5-star resort, please go and at least try out the therapeutic healing powers of the beaches of the Adriatic. But of course, the real jewel here is the spectacular Bay of Kotor, also known as Boka. That's what the locals call it. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We're going to see so many UNESCO World Heritage Sites on this little tour around the Balkans. And there's a wealth of religious buildings here, monasteries, churches, cathedrals, both Orthodox and Catholic. And Catholic because this is where the Venetian Republic ended. The last time I was in Kotor, it was after an earthquake. So that's why you see some scaffolding there on the picture of the cathedral. But Kotor itself is amazing. You can see the city walls, I hope, going up the mountains here. And it gives you a foretaste of the rest of Montenegro. I mean, it means, you know, it's called Crna. I can't roll my R's, I'm afraid. It's called Crna in the local language. Montenegro is the translation in Italian. And we would say Black Mountain. And there is a Black Mountain up in the north of Montenegro. So let's go to the mountains. Let's take you there now. So Montenegro was proclaimed the first ecological state in Europe. And it's really got wild nature and spectacular scenery by the bucket load. Typically the rivers, the canyons, these spectacular giant craggy mountains, clear lakes and emerald green lakes like the famous Pure Lake. And the largest lake in the Balkans, Skadar, is also in Montenegro. My picture of the lake here, the one on the bottom right, is a Trnovačko, and this is famous because it's the heart-shaped lake. It's the only place where which has a rainforest, well, it has the last rainforest, they say, in Europe, the Biogradska Gora. This is where you'll see amazing wildlife, including wild birds. And there are 5 national parks in Montenegro, amazing for such a small place. Remember, it's the size of Northern Ireland. So the most famous one probably is Dermitor, again, UNESCO World Heritage Site. And Dermitor includes the Crna Mountain, the Black Mountain. It also includes the Tara Gorge. And my picture here is of the bridge over the Tara Gorge. Now, the Montenegrins boast that, you know, even though their country is small, it can never be fully explored. And you know what? I believe them, but give it a try. I'm still trying, and I'll keep going back because it's spectacular. Now, Bosnia, a very, very complex but fascinating country for me. This I feel is where East meets West. Forget Istanbul. People say Istanbul is where it's not. Istanbul is very much in the East. It's just where the continents meet. If you really want to see the mix of cultures, ethnicities, religions, if you want to see them all come together, go to Bosnia and Herzegovina. People often ask me, what's my favorite city in the world? And I always reply, Sarajevo, because this was the place where it all came together. All the reasons why the country fell apart are all the reasons why I loved it and still do. You know, in Sarajevo, within 100 meters, you'd have an Orthodox cathedral, a Catholic cathedral, and a mosque. It's fascinating. It's the nearest country to us where you can really feel and really live Muslim heritage. And probably for most people, their first experience of that, you know, as they stay in Dubrovnik and they do the excursion, is to Mostar. It means old bridge. And it was built in 1566 by Hayreddin. I remember that because I've crossed it so many times. It's 24 meters high. And if you're lucky enough, you'll see people, young lads, jumping off the bridge and really risking life. And then people die doing this, but they'll do it to earn some Bosnian marks or preferably euros. And I'm sure you know that now this is a reconstruction as the original was blown up in the Bosnian War. I mean, a terrible day for me. And I remember seeing it on the news and crying. I'm getting emotional now thinking about it, actually, because I believe, you know, firmly that cultural heritage is sacrosanct and you can never get it back. Although fair play to them here, you know, they've done their best to recreate it. And if there's one advantage of this recreation, it's that the steps that you can see in that second picture are not the slippy death trap that they once were. You know, the number of groups I've taken there where we had incidents because it was so slippy, being, you know, 400 years old, I've lost count. But anyway, go and visit it. It's spectacular. But there are many other places you can visit throughout Bosnia. This is Pocitelja, which is the artist village along the Neretva Valley. Here you've also got the river Neretva, which cuts right through the center of Bosnia. A winding road follows it all the way, going through gorges and caves. It's a fantastic journey that will take you from Mostar to Sarajevo. And there you'll have the fabulous bazaar, Basjarshir, in the center of Sarajevo. They've got bazaars like this everywhere, in Yaitsa, in Mostar. Go and experience them. The smell, not just all the things that you can see here, but the smell and the smell of the chivapchichi, the small sausages that they cook there, the smell of burek, is, you know, the pastries that they make, that made of phyllo pastry filled with spinach or meat or cheese, is just absolutely amazing and very evocative. But for me, as with all these countries, the real beauty is in the nature. And whenever I think of the nature of Bosnia, I think of waterfalls. The most famous waterfall in Bosnia is probably Yaitsa, which is a major tourist site in itself and has lots of history associated. It's where the Communist Party of Yugoslavia was founded, so it was a big destination in the communist days, and a massive waterfall falling through the center. But the one I've chosen to highlight is Strabački Buk, which you can see here on the left, which I've been to many times. It's a really spectacular waterfall and really easy to access. And it's on the Una River, the Una Canyon, which is also one of their national parks. And on the calm parts of the river, it's possible to take these electric boats out and have beautiful picnics. Really, the nature of Bosnia is untouched and really spectacular to visit. Now, Albania. You know, I wanted to go to Albania back in the 1980s, and it was a real something I wanted to do because I was fascinated by this country that was a closed society in the communist times under Enver Hoxha. And I never made it, and I finally made it only a couple of years ago, actually, for the first time, when I took the bus there from Kosovo. And I took the bus back, and I just want to explain to you a little bit about the transport now, because I hope you can see my pointer. So I was in Tirana, the capital of Albania, and I wanted to go to Ohrid, Struga actually, in Macedonia. And on the way, I wanted to go to Elbasan, which is the old Roman city with lots of Roman architectural remains. So I got to the bus station in Tirana. It was absolute chaos, as all these places are. And 30 or 40 different travel agents all selling tickets, and you had to go to the right one for the particular bus that you wanted. Everybody spoke Albanian, and it was a nightmare to find it. Anyway, eventually, I managed to book, along with my friends and family, a ticket to Struga. And the bus journey, it should have taken 40 minutes to Elbasan, 40 minutes onwards to Struga. The bus journey was 3.5 hours. And I thought, oh, great, it means I've got time to go and explore in Elbasan. So I got on the bus, really hot day, fell asleep, woke up, and all I saw out of the window of the bus was this massive ship, you know, like a car ferry that goes across the channel. It was that big. And I thought, what on earth is this? Surely this is not Lake Ohrid with this big boat. I can't believe. I'd never been to Ohrid, and I'd look forward to, I can't believe they've got these big boats here ruining it. And then I realized I was actually here in Durrës, going in completely the opposite direction. So naturally went up, asked everybody, is this the bus to Struga? Yes, yes, the bus to Struga. And of course, what happened? The bus turned around, went back to Tirana, went on the ring road, bypassed Elbasan completely, didn't get to see it, and then went to Struga. 3.5 hours later, I arrived. And I still don't understand why it was going backwards and forwards. It's probably a relic from the communist days, but it just goes to show that, you know, I still do not understand the Balkans, and I guess no matter how many times I go, I never will. But be prepared for crazy things like this happening to you. But anyway, let's go back to Albania. And what I loved about Albania was the drive of the place. It feels like a very young country. In many ways it is. It's only been around since 1912, but it's got a real entrepreneurial spirit which comes out. People want to do well. People want their country to succeed. They want it to improve. They want to be, everybody who spoke to me, who understood me at any rate, they were all excited about the prospect at some point in the future that they might be members of the European Union. And so the first picture I want to show you is Gjirokastër, here on the left. This is the old Ottoman a jewel really of Albania. It's got the best Ottoman architecture. And I put it up there because this image with the shops and the bustle and the tourism, it's a world away from what I was expecting to experience back on my 1980s trip, and just shows how much the country has developed. It's also the birthplace of Enver Hoxha, the communist dictator for 40 odd years until his death in 1985. But we'll come on to him shortly. Let's start with Skenderberg or Skenderbeg, who you can see here riding his horse in Skenderberg Square, the main square in Tirana, the capital. He's the national hero. He's a 15th century freedom fighter and the first man to unite the Albanian peoples. And in fact, the double-headed eagle that you see on the flag behind there, on the Albanian national flag, that's Skenderbeg's coat of arms. So the flag dates from the 15th century, from his times. But the other famous person, probably leader of Albania, other than Skenderberg and Enver Hoxha, is probably King Zog. If we know anybody, we know King Zog. He was originally prime minister, then president of Albania, and then for 11 years, from 1928, king of Albania. That was until Mussolini invaded in 1939. So here's his statue. He died in exile. This is in the centre of Tirana. He died in exile in France, but he's been reinterred a few years ago in the Royal Mausoleum in Tirana, which obviously you can visit. And here are the communist leaders in the communist leader graveyard, all the statues that were toppled and tumbled, which happened across the whole of Eastern Europe. Here it was particularly Stalinist in Albania. So the statues are here in a park in the city centre for you to go and admire. But you can't, there's no escaping the communism. It was such a pervasive part of society. It was everywhere. And it's all over the centre of Tirana. The main square, other than Skenderberg, the main building that you'd see in the Opera House, is the Palace of Culture with the communist murals, which fascinate me, this communist art and style. And it's still used as the Palace of Culture now. But probably the oddest building is this one on the right. It's the Pyramid. It was designed as a museum of Enver Hoxha's life. By the time it was completed, actually, he'd been dead 3 years, and it was designed by his daughter, who was actually an architect. Now, because of these communist associations and the Hoxha associations, since the revolution in 1991, it's been falling into ruin. And it has some uses as a broadcasting station for radios, but principally it's in ruins, and there's been a big debate whether it should be pulled down or not. I think the plans are to turn it into an IT centre for young people. Whatever happens to it, right now, it's probably the best skate park in Europe. You do see people sliding down from the roof. It's phenomenal what they do. And also, it's impossible to miss the bunkers in Albania, especially as there are 173,000 of them in the country, which is about 15 per every square mile. So you can't avoid them. They're all over the countryside, and they're even right in the city centre of Tirana. Here we are, right next to the Parliament building in Tirana. There's a bunker. I managed to climb inside one of them, and that's the view that you would get. And I just got lucky that day that two people were walking past in national costume. I thought they were going to get married, but actually then I saw them asking for money to have people having their photographs taken with them. So I think they were just there for the tourists. But anyway, go in them, have a look at. You can't miss them. They're really interesting leftovers from the Cold War, as is the bunker next to the Houses of Parliament, which is where the Communist Party would have escaped to in the event of a nuclear attack, which they lived under the threat of constantly. The bunker is fantastic because it's been turned into a museum. It's an art museum, but also a museum to the communist times. And here you've got lists of people who were tortured by the Communist Party. It's fascinating and really an insight into those terrible and very dark times when it was a closed society and really hard to visit. Now, our newest country, Kosovo. Kosovo is a place I've visited twice since independence was declared in 2008. It's a fascinating country, which is really developing rapidly. For instance, it's got the most incredible motorways I've ever seen anywhere. They're built on bridges through gorges, they're amazing. And you'll travel on those to get anywhere in Kosovo, to all the major cities. But let's start with this. Take a look at the Kosovan flag right there. It's the last time you'll probably see it, because when you go to Kosovo, there are not many of them around. Nearly all the flags, like this one that I took from the taxi window as I was driving around in the capital Pristina, are Albanian. And that's because the majority of the population by a long way is Albanian. And the Albanian heritage really comes to the fore. They've also got a Skenderberg Plaza. There's Skenderberg himself right outside the Parliament building. But it's a spectacular country, incredible journeys wherever you go. Here's a journey through the Rugova Valley. I've just pulled up there just so you can see. It's not one of the motorways, but the motorways do go through scenery like this. And it's a crazy place. People really write off Pristina as a destination, but I don't. I love Pristina. And in the center, it's got a real vibe to it. And it's a city of great contrasts. And yes, on the top of that hotel building, that is a Statue of Liberty, by the way. So you expect the unexpected when you go to Pristina. This is the main street. It's a massive shopping street. It's where all the big hotels are, and also where all the main monuments are. So here's one of K4. It's a memorial to the people from NATO. K4 was the peacekeeping force. And obviously people died from United Nations countries assisting Kosovo to gain their independence. So there's naturally a memorial and a monument to that. But there's no escaping this lady. Everyone wants a piece of her in this region. This is, I'm sure you can, if you can't read the Cyrillic, I'm sure you can guess that it's Mother Teresa of Calcutta. She was born in Albania. She had a house in Macedonia, and they've turned that into a museum. And no doubt she's got a house somewhere in Kosovo. I didn't get a chance to find it. I wasn't there long enough, so I had to settle for a photograph of just the statue. But go off the main street in Pristina, and you come across a whole network of small bars, independent cafes, breweries, restaurants. And as you can see, once again, for your benefit, I've sampled some of them just so I can say, yes, they are fantastic. And this is my chance to just mention about Christmas markets, given that it's this time of year. But Christmas markets in places, not everywhere, because it's not their culture. And when you get them, they're usually pretty small. This is the one in Pristina, in the capital, underneath the Skenderberg statue. So you can see they're pretty tiny. If you want to do a Balkan Christmas market, I highly recommend that you go to Zagreb in Croatia, because for the last 3 years, it's been voted the best Christmas market in Europe. But like all of these countries, Kosovo has many ancient monuments and UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And if you're short on time, as I was, then really head straight for the Ottoman capital, Prizren. I know it's in your program, Sunita. Here's the Sinan Pasha Mosque. It's the center of activity in the town by day and by night. And it's a really buzzy place, as well as being culturally significant. It's been a fortress here since the Bronze Ages. You can see it up on the hill there, above the Ottoman Bridge and above the mosque. It's well worth the walk to the top. There's my wife making a guest appearance for you there. The view of the town is spectacular, as is the view of the Shah Mountains. You get some idea from that picture, as well as the earlier one, of the gorges and the mountains. And really, it's a taste, these mountains, of what Kosovo offers beyond the towns and the cities. Moving swiftly on, North Macedonia, the newest name, thanks to the treaty with Greece in 2018. It's beautiful, and in my opinion, gloriously bonkers, just like its flag is there. Why is it gloriously bonkers? Because let's go back to 2008 and the great financial crash. Macedonia wanted to attract foreign investment, and they thought the best way to do this would be to attract tourists. And they thought the best way to attract tourists would be to completely change the look of their city. So Skopje looks completely different now to when I first visited it in the 1980s. It's unrecognizable. Whole areas have been demolished to make way for new massive public buildings and massive statues. And these statues are everywhere. Here you've got on the left, Philip of Macedonia, in the center, Alexander the Great. They are huge, they're monolithic, they're everywhere. They cost a lot of money, and Macedonians think, by and large, that they were a waste of money, and the money could have been spent on other things. And you'll often see them covered in paint. People come and throw tins of paint on them, and there'll be demonstrations about them often. Mostly, in my humble opinion, I think they're kind of pastiches of what these statues should really be. It's almost Disney-esque, actually, in the way they look. But they're fascinating, and there's no getting away from them. But every now and then, you come across a statue that just cheers up your day, and that's what that one on the bottom right was for me. So as with the statues, so with the public buildings in Skopje. On the left, here's the Archaeological Museum, and on the bottom right is the Museum of the Macedonian Struggle, which I found interesting, and I definitely recommend it as for a visit if you want to understand about this country. I mean, it's been shared between Greece, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria. They've all got bits of it, and what's left now belonged to Serbia until 1918. So it's a very complex history and a long fought for independence, as you can see from the plaque on that bridge. But it's not all 21st century carbuncles, as somebody might say. The city is dominated by the fortress, or the Kala, which you can see here. And this dates back to Crusader times. And up on the hill next to the fortress is the Mustafa Pasha Mosque, and which dates back to the 15th century. And it's actually largely untouched since the 15th century. So it's fantastic Ottoman heritage. And as with Belgrade, as with all of these big cities, here's the one, is it the Mother Macedonia statue, whatever, I can't remember what it's called actually, but it's one of those statues celebrating the glory of the country, right on the highest point as usual. But get out of all of that, go and explore the nightlife. There's plenty to celebrate in Macedonia, and there are two great places to celebrate it in Skopje. One is the Old Bazaar, which is the middle picture at the bottom. It's the hub for the young people and old hipsters like myself. Go there, embrace and be embraced. People will love you. And on the left is a picture from the Caravanserai restaurant, which is in the center of the bazaar. It really is the old inn from the Ottoman times, built around a courtyard, and you eat in the courtyard. You eat the most amazing Macedonian food with Macedonian wine. It's just fantastic, and the vibe is brilliant. And the other place is the Debar Malo area, the Mamarka of Macedonia, if you like. That's what the other three pictures are there. It's cobbled old streets filled with local Macedonian restaurants, great food, great drink, street entertainers. And once again, you know, I just had to taste it for your benefit so I can recommend it on this tour around the Balkans. But North Macedonia, like the whole region, has spectacular scenery. It's got winter and summer mountain resorts. It's got great sustainable tourism offerings, which I know the people there are working really hard to deliver and focusing on at the moment. And what I'm highlighting for you now is the Matka Gorge. This is literally just a short ride out of Skopje. I think it's about 10 kilometers. It's really not very far. And it just shows you how accessible the scenery is in North Macedonia. Canoe down it if you've got the energy. Otherwise, do like I did and take the easy option, a sustainable trip on an electric boat. And for you all, I've saved the real jewel in the crown until the end. You know, the beauty that is Lake Ohrid. So I approached it, having had that nightmare journey on the bus from Albania, by boat, electric boat from Struga. You can see my journey there on the left. Struga is the home of the famous poetry festival, the most famous poetry festival in the world. But the journey, it was silent on an electric boat. It was beautiful. It was absolutely magical. And if you can approach the town that way, please do. The first thing that you see is the iconic church of St. John at Caneo, another, of course, UNESCO site. And I was overwhelmed by the UNESCO sites here. It's crammed full per square mile. It must have the most of any town in Europe. The amphitheatre, the Roman amphitheatre, took me back. The scale of it, the way it's been preserved, and it's often overlooked. Most people don't even know it's there. And of course, I was awestruck, completely awestruck by the Church of Saint Sophia here at the bottom. It dates from the 10th century. I mean, can you imagine? That's like 1,100 years old. It's Byzantine. It predates the Ottomans. It's Byzantine. And these frescoes inside, they date from the same period. So they cover the period really from the 10th to the 14th century, and are made naturally a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But the real beauty is the lake itself. Sorry, my son, I chased him away, now he's calling me. The real beauty is the lake itself. Here you can see my wife going down for our morning dip. The lake was beautifully warm, really peaceful. I can't recommend it enough. After being in all of those cities and up the mountains, it was just lovely to come here and relax and taste some great food and wine. Now, talking about getting around, I should point out that the rail network in these countries is very limited. These red lines on the map indicate where you can travel by rail. It's not that great. So a lot of the travel I do, and I do tend to travel on public transport. I'm very into sustainable ways of traveling. I did by local bus, which you can see there. That was my bus from Kosovo into Albania. They're good, they're high quality, all air conditioned. The trains haven't really moved on in probably a century. So the journeys take you a long time, principally because of all the mountains and the gorges, but the scenery is spectacular. So the journey, if you use my arrow again, from Sofia here in Bulgaria to Niš, the main, kind of like the crew, I guess, of Serbia, but a great historic town. That's not very far, and but it took best part of 12 hours maybe to do it. Because as you see on the top right-hand side, you're going through just spectacular scenery, gorgeous mountains. You can reach out and touch the mountains out of the windows. You're that close to them. It's an unbelievable journey. And the picture at the bottom, believe it or not, this is the main train line from Belgrade to Athens and in another direction onwards to Istanbul. One track. So no wonder it takes such a long time. You go at almost a snail's pace. Sometimes I thought it was quicker to walk. But that was the view that I took out of the back of the train. A word of warning, if you do travel on these trains, not all of them, I must admit, but on some of them, particularly the night train down to Belgrade from Budapest, take your baby wipes with you because it does look like that. And that was a good one, people, believe me. Now, let's finish off with some food and hooch. The food is unbelievable here. I've already mentioned the burek and the cevapcici, this kind of street food of Bosnia. That's what you can see on the right-hand side. The small sausages and the Bosnian bread, the burek wrapped around there with made from phyllo pastry. The peppers, roast peppers, you get everywhere, and there are incredible breads in this region. On the left is the banquet that I had in Albania. I can't remember what it was called, but you can just see the quality of the food, different dips, the aubergines, the yogurts and so on, all very Eastern influenced. On the left, I've got a Balkan breakfast for you. So bits of burek, bits of pastry, egg, cucumber, almost a shopska salad, a Greek or a Bulgarian salad in the making there. And the little red dip in the dish is ivar, which you get all across the Balkans. It's their version of ketchup, but it's made from roasted red peppers and absolutely delicious. The meats and the cured meats are unbelievable. On the top, you've got another banquet there with the vine leaves from southern Balkans, and the bottom right, a selection of cheeses, some of them deep fried. The Travnik cheese is probably the most famous. You might come across it all across the Balkans and even in some of the ethnic supermarkets here in the UK. It's not all meat. The seafood, of course, especially in Montenegro, is unbelievable. You've got some seafood carpaccios along the top there. Local dishes involving pasta because of the Italian influence, black risotto, the squid ink risotto, and octopus is a must in this region, whether it's octopus carpaccio or octopus salad. I thought that was tuna when I put that picture up, but looking at it earlier today, I thought, actually, I think it might be beef. But anyway, It shows you that you get, as well as all the ethnic and the rustic food, you do get very high quality haute cuisine in these places too, and that's beef or tuna with Travnik cheese. And if you go into the mountains, or even you can get this on the coast, please try Under the Bell or peka. It's a phenomenal experience. It's meat in the mountains, typically goat, lamb, it could be pork, that's cooked in a massive dish with a lid, which is the bell, placed over it, and then ashes poured over the bell from the hot embers, and the meat is cooked for hours, so it becomes really succulent, very beautiful. And then, you know, when they do the great reveal, it's a huge dish, typically a party dish, and it's really heavy. I couldn't lift this thing here, the dish, the lid. It needed this guy to do it for me. He's a really big, heavy, chunky Bosnian chef, and he's got guns that can lift a peka like nobody. Try it if you will, but make sure you've got very good holiday insurance for potential hospitalization if you give it a go. But certainly try the food. In the mountains, it's the meat, as I mentioned. On the sea, it's mainly fish or octopus that's cooked in a broth, but fantastic, and the experience is unbelievable. And looking at the hooch, let's start with the wines. Now, don't expect in the Balkans that you'll get your Chardonnays and your Sauvignon Blancs. You might, but that's not what they do. They have their own grapes over there, which they've been growing for thousands of years. Expect things like Malvasia, whether it's red or white, Rabula for the red. In Serbia, Prokupats, which is what they make the rosé from. In Serbia, I tried the sparkling one there that you can see, Vronsky, which was excellent and can hold its own with any cava, prosecco, champagne, you name it. I thought it was fabulous. I know the Zupa vineyard is on your list of things to do in Serbia if you go with Travel the Unknown. The largest vineyard in North Macedonia, which is a great wine producing region, is Tikves. You can see it there, the Traminets wine. Tikves you can get in Marks and Spencer's these days, I know. You also try the Vranets, which is indigenous to Montenegro, and the award-winning Alexandria Cuvée, which you can see me quaffing there on the left, the rosé at Ohrid. And a quick word about Albania. Kalmet is the wine there. In Bosnia, the main grape is Zilavka. Kosovo has its own grape varieties too, and a great wine producer in Stone Castle. I've tried them all. These are all my pictures. Again, all for your benefit and all research for work. So that's just how it is. That's how we roll. A quick word about the beers. Yes, you get the mass-produced beers. This is Skopsko, which is the kind of national beer of Macedonia, the main producer. But there are so many new breweries opening up, the craft beers. I mentioned the entrepreneurship in Albania, but it's everywhere across this region. And small producers opening up everywhere. Support them. It's a great way for areas to grow and develop and to keep tourism sustainable. And when you've had all of your food and drink, you have to have a coffee. The Ottomans, of course, brought Turkish coffee. Some say Turkish coffee actually comes from Sarajevo, so it's a Bosnian thing, not a Turkish thing. And in Bosnia, you do ask for Bosnian coffee, not Turkish coffee. It's essentially the same thing. And of course, because of the influence of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they did occupy Belgrade for over 100 years, then of course there are the cakes and the Wiener coffees. And in my opinion, the best place to try this is the Hotel Mospa in the center of Belgrade. That's what I had. And that's pretty much it. That's the end of my jaunt around the Balkans. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's Christmas, so let's finish with a Christmas picture. That's me in the Christmas market in Skopje. I was there exactly this time last year. On the 9th of December, 2019, I was in Skopje celebrating at the Christmas market and looking forward to 2020. And it's been a strange year. And all I can hope is that 2021 is a very different year for all of us. And whatever your travel plans, I hope they include the Balkans, but whatever they are, I hope you're able to fulfill them and that you have a great 2021. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Robert, for whetting our appetite and with an amazing visual treat along with your experiences and interesting insights. I'm sure most of us can't really wait to visit now. Before we go on to our tours, there's something I would like to say. On behalf of our local teams, we at Travel the Unknown would like to take this opportunity to thank you and all our clients around the globe who were booked to travel with us in 2020 and opted to postpone the holiday rather than take a refund. And a big thanks also to those of you who are continuing to book for 2021 and 2022. The monies paid as deposit has gone a long way in helping our local partners look after the welfare of their staff in these hard times. As we are all aware, the people and businesses in most countries in the developing world do not get any government aid whatsoever. Your understanding and support in these challenging times has been greatly appreciated. So thank you all once again. And now we'll move on to our tours, and I promise I'll make it very quick. Won't take too long. So are you all able to see my screen? We offer a range of tours to the Balkans. Some are multi-country tours, and then we also have individual tours for different countries. The popular ones being Balkan Explorer. It's a 20-day tour, and it covers the highlights of all the Balkan countries. And we done two trips in a year, in May as well as in September. Going on to the next one, Archaeology of Balkans. As Robert mentioned, the Balkans are on the crossroads of Europe and Middle East, and you do find a lot of cross-cultural influence there in it's their culture, the language, the architecture, archaeology, and this tour covers exactly that, the archaeology, which they are known for, and so many UNESCO heritage sites. So all that is covered in this 19-day trip. Here again, we run two trips every year in May as well as in September. Then other group trips, single country group trips are Albanian Odyssey and Archaeology of Serbia. Here again, we have two departures. We do run them during May and September, which are the best months to travel. Then there are some private tours. The Balkan Odyssey is a multi-country tour, and individual ones for Bosnia, Kosovo, North Macedonia, and Montenegro. General information, these countries are 1 hour ahead of GMT. There are direct flight options to most of these countries from UK as well as other European countries. And no visa is required for up to 90 days of travel for UK or most other nationalities. Though we do recommend that if you are doing a multi-country trip, do check the visa regulations for each of the countries, because it does vary from nationality to nationality. Money, again, it does vary for all the countries except Montenegro and Kosovo, which use euro. ATMs are available in most cities, and credit cards are also accepted, though in rural areas, cash is preferred. April to November are typically the best months to travel, though July and August are something we would recommend avoiding because it's the busiest, teeming with tourists. So if you want to place more to yourself, then it's better to avoid those months. And now we go on to our questions. So we do have some questions here already. Robert, what would you say about the border crossings here? Like, is it very time consuming going from one country to the other?
It can be, because these countries are not in the European Union. I remember when I crossed into Montenegro, the last time, it was the height of the summer, and it took me 1.5 hours to get across the border from Dubrovnik to Novi, let's call it Kotor. So it can take time, and it depends on the time of year that you go. So I've crossed over into Bosnia. It's taken me sometimes an hour, sometimes 10 minutes going over from Croatia. The border from Macedonia to Kosovo, I've never had a problem with. It's been really quick. And the crossing over from Albania to Kosovo on that bus journey, that was a real experience. Now, I'm told my experience was exceptional, but it does happen, so be aware of it. It was almost like going back to the communist days when we did this, and we were all ordered off the bus at the border. I thought I was at that strange little place that's in your itinerary that has declared independence, because it was such a strange experience, and it took me back 40 years. We were all taken off the bus into a shed. There were dogs, Alsatians barking at us and so on. And we just thought, it's the experience. Let's just embrace it and go with it. Within 20 minutes or so, we were back on the bus. And once they realized we were British, we were absolutely fine. And it was the other people who had all their bags and things searched. And that really is exceptional. Most of the time, I don't have a problem crossing from border to border, and it mainly takes 10, 15 minutes. But go in the height of the summer, go to the real tourist hotspots, and it can take you a long time. Just be prepared. Albania was an exception. I just want you to know about that bizarre experience, just in case it happens to you. Then at least you say, well, Robert did mention that.
No, I agree. I think, yeah, it can be. It's just, if it's your lucky day, yeah, you can get through very quickly. Or it can take time, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I've had delays at Manchester Airport that have been longer. So.
Thank you. How about cycling? Are the locals much into cycling, or how about somebody who wants to kind of, cycle around these areas?
Well, cycling was the mode of transport de rigueur back in the communist days in Albania. So people are well used to cycling down there. And you probably saw on my picture of the statues of Skopje, a guy on his bike, an old guy on his bike. So yes, people do cycle around there. Then a lot of the local agents here are really focusing, as I said, on sustainable travel. So they're looking at alternative ways for people to explore their countryside. And electric bikes are becoming very popular in the region. So it's possible to go out and do cycling, even up in the mountains and in the hills, using these electric bikes. And nearly all of the main cities will have one place, at least, where you'll be able to organize or book independently a cycle tour of the city. And they're often the best way of seeing places, because things like, for instance, the Royal Mausoleum in Tirana, it's not in the city centre. So if you want to see it, a bike tour is probably the best way to do it.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm not sure if you know this, but why do the Kosovans not appear interested in uniting with Albania? Any idea?
Well, maybe they do. I'm I'm going to stay clear of that one, if you don't mind, just in case there are any Kosovans or Albanians or Serbians listening. But yes, there is a movement within Kosovo for people to unite with Albania. There's equally a movement for independence, because it was hard fought and hard won. And it's a country that's not recognized by every nation. I think it's something like 99 out of 170 nations in the United Nations recognize Kosovo as an independent country. So who knows what the future will hold. As you saw, the map of this region changes constantly. And if it changes again, well, I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, let's hope not. And we all get to enjoy what it has to offer. Thank you. And are the restaurants expensive in these places?
No, nothing.
Not the high-end ones, but just the regular restaurants.
Nothing is expensive in these destinations. Even the high-end restaurants are really very cheap. Gosh, what would you pay? Usually people treat me. I don't know what they pay. As you saw, all of this was for work, so I never paid. No, when you do pay, it's really not. I mean, that breakfast that cost about £1.50, I think.
Oh, wow.
A good dinner with all of those £10, £11 maybe, for a banquet, really for a banquet, and a couple of quid for a bottle of wine. I mean, it's almost rude not to, They're offering it so cheaply. Thank you.
And where would you recommend hiking for people?
Oh, everywhere. Everywhere is good for hiking. The whole place is mountainous, apart from those places which are hilly, like Fruška Gora. So everywhere really is good for hiking. Clearly, stay away from border areas. But I mentioned there are 5 national parks in Serbia, 5 in Albania. There's a similar number in Sarajevo. All of them are great destinations for hiking, and all local operators will be able to help you plan routes. It's one of the best regions in the world for hiking. Go anywhere, land anywhere, take a budget airline to any one of these places, and they'll all offer you possibilities to do just that. And not just hiking, you can go skiing in a lot of these places too.
Okay. That's great then, thank you. Are there any problems moving between the Republika Srpska and the rest of Bosnia?
No. There might be border controls here and there, but they're not official border controls. It's just like police stops, but nothing really to concern yourself about. Mostly you don't even notice when you've crossed through the border region. It's pretty safe.
Okay.
It's all part of a federation, and it's been a federation really since 1995. So we're coming up to almost, what, 15 years of it in operation. So no, it's a very stable, very safe country. You know, there's no, I've never had an issue in Bosnia, and I absolutely love traveling around there.
All right, thank you. And another question around that. Susan says she's been advised not to take her car to Albania due to high rates of car theft. Is that still a problem?
Oh, I don't know. I've never heard of the car theft in Albania. Let me look up that one, and we'll come back to you. I can't comment.
Great, yeah. So we'll do that, Susan. We'll come back to you. And Patricia had another question about which would be the one spot you would recommend flying into from where you can do cycling around?
In this region, probably, well, it's different. It depends where you're coming from. You know, if you're coming from the north, then it's probably easy to take an EasyJet flight into Pristina. If you're coming from the south, then you can probably get the Wizz Air flights from Luton into Skopje. Either or would be perfectly fine. One of the great cycling routes, though, of course, is along the Danube. And I didn't mention this, the Danube and the Sava rivers. If you're not looking for those ones that are really going to exert you up in the mountains, then follow the Danube. There's a fantastic cycle trail, or the length pretty much of the Danube. And it's a great trip. You see many people cycling through it.
Fantastic, thank you. So I think we are done with the questions, but should you have anything later, you can always email ask@traveltheunknown.com. We will continue to host more online events from January onwards. Look out for our newsletter and registration details on our events page. And as always, a recording of this presentation will also be on our events page soon. As I hand the virtual mic back to Robert, please may I request all of you to turn on your videos as well as microphones.
Thank you. I'm not sure how we go about doing this.
So I'll stop sharing my screen, Robert, and you can share yours again.
Okay, so I share screen, do I?
Yes, you can share your screen. And it's nice to see everyone. Hello, everyone.
Hello, nice to see you all. I hope you all enjoyed that. I've just been reading some of the lovely comments. Thank you very much. And
Thank you very much.
It was amazing.
Great.
Fantastic
Great to hear
presentation.
from you all.
Thank you.
Here's another picture from the Christmas market at Skopje 12 months ago. And we just thought it's the end of the year and it's Christmas. So let's just mark that by all getting. It's been a traumatic year for us all. I'm just looking behind me because what you might see up here, let me bring it down. There's a couple of things. This bottle, it looks like a bottle of Coca-Cola filled with water. It's not. It's another one of these little stories about sustainability for you. This comes from a village, a mountain village up in Bosnia. And in many of these mountain villages, right across the Balkans, people make their own rakia, the local firewater brandy. This is made from plums, so it's a sliver brandy or a slivovich. I've never risked opening it. They always put them in these Coke bottles. It's a real good example of environmental protection, if you like, reusing plastic. And they put them all in here, and I've never opened it. Maybe tonight's the night when I do. I'm worried about what the proof might be of this thing and where it might send me. So I'm going to play safe, and I'm going to open rakia from Itak in Bosnia. Here it is. And I've also got with me my burek, which I got in a local Turkish supermarket. And I'm going to pour myself, I hope you do too, pour yourself a little drink. And what we're going to do is have our own little Christmas party. Have you all got Christmas hats?
Right, let's get them on.
Handy, put them on. I don't. I've just got Christmas reindeer antlers. It's going to have to do. Get your drink. Get whatever is handy. And let's all have a sing for just a couple of minutes. Sunita asked me, are there any famous Balkan songs that we can all sing along to, particularly at Christmas? And I said, no, there isn't.
Get
Really.
off.
But the Slav, in terms of Slavic songs, the most famous Christmas Slavic song, I guess, is Good King Wenceslas. He was a Western Slav from Bohemia. So there were the Southern Slavs, the Yugoslavs, the Western Slavs, and the Eastern Slavs from Russia, Belarus, and so on. So it's the nearest I can get to a Slavic Christmas song is Good King Wenceslas. You all know the words. If you don't, they're on here. So please join in as we sing. Oh, I've ended the show as we sing Good King Wenceslas.
Cheers, everyone, and do join in.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Merry
Good
Christmas.
King
Happy Christmas,
Wenceslas
everybody.
looked out on the feet of Stephen. When the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even, brightly shone the moon that night, though the frost was cruel. When a poor man came in, gathering winter fuel. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for listening. Merry Christmas.
Cheers. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
2021.
Have a great 2021. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for joining us today,
Rahul down there.
Robert, for making this a memorable event.
Thank you,
On
Sunita.
the 6th of January at 11 a.m. when we will be taking you to Borneo.
Oh,
Have a good evening.